I swear to God, no musician in my general vicinity would have said any of the things that you just said at all.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
I get that.
fascinating to me. Hello, and welcome to Crushing Classical, redefining a thriving classical music career. On today's Fireside Chat, Eileen and I had a lively conversation about all things behind the scenes with musicians and jobs in orchestras and how orchestras work, and other stuff that most musicians generally don't think about before considering getting a job. Or if they do get a job, don't think that they can change it. I mean, honestly, I never considered what a nonprofit was as I was training to play in an orchestra. It never occurred to me to consider what kind of business model orchestras run on and how it affected me. And as I spent time in one place here in North Carolina, I got to see the business side of an orchestra a little better just by observing. And there's a lot to observe. And musicians mostly do just that and don't really have many resources to affect the change they think ought to happen other than serve on a committee. Or so I thought, until we started talking about possibilities. And Eileen had a lot of ideas I never thought of. Anyway, I'll let you hear the conversation. Let's get started. Hey, Eileen.
What's up?
A lot, because a little while ago, we had a timely rant on text.
As usual.
It was so perfect because it led right into our scheduled call. So the rant was not a lot of times our topics on Fireside Chat come from rants on text, and it's not because I say, hey Eileen, let's rant about something, but they just sort of happen through our conversations.
Yep.
And today we started talking about how orchestras are run. For a variety of reasons, and just the nonprofit model and what it means, and we had mentioned once before, I remember a long time ago on one of our Fireside Chats, we were talking about how, like, we were both in Chicago Youth Symphony, and back then we didn't know, that it was a nonprofit or even what that meant. We just showed up and did our thing. And honestly, so that's an example from youth orchestra, but I think that keeps going. Like, you don't ever in music school, there's no class that teaches about how nonprofits work. But every orchestra is a nonprofit now.
Maybe they teach it. I mean, I don't know. When we were in school, they didn't teach it. But
they might. I'd have to look that up. But I think if they do teach it, it's probably geared towards the students who are taking like a music business major.
Yeah, that's probably right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not just like required by performance majors to know.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, can I bring up the detail a little bit of what the text, because Tracy sends me this text and she says, I'm baffled by the audience because, and she gives a reason why, and we'll talk about that later. But there was this thing where you said you were annoyed by a couple things. And one of them was that the North Carolina Symphony they just got off a tour. They just went on it was like a week tour, right? A week long?
It was not that long. It was like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. They went to DC.
Okay. Short. It was only a few days. Okay. It was only a few days, but your husband came back and he said, I guess he was reading the review from they went to a music festival in DC, and
for new music.
Right, for new music. And of course the first comment was, they were reviewing the compositions and they didn't say anything about the orchestra, and so the first thing he says is they didn't say anything about the orchestra, right?
Right, they didn't even mention the orchestra. We played really well. They didn't mention it. Right,
and I'm sure that what was your reaction to that, by the way, when he said that?
I was like,
be honest.
I don't remember. I think I was just like, it was for new music, so
it wasn't about you,
right? And the composers were there, so they're not gonna. They're not going to. You weren't the main attraction. I'm sorry to say.
Right, the music festival for new compositions. That means that's very clear what that means. So, So anyway, so there was that, and then there was also that he had some inside track or something, and found out through the grapevine that they that the orchestra had chosen not to market
Right.
for the tour. Is that right?
It wasn't, I mean, and it wasn't, you could have just found that out by yourself because you just look on the website and say like, there's nothing on here about it. Like there's nothing on the website that was, promoting it at all. So
Well, and
they,
here's what's interesting though. I mean, and I wouldn't necessarily put marketing for that on the website. I think I would spread marketing around in DC maybe. Or you know what I'm saying? Like I wouldn't put that on the North Carolina Symphony website.
right. And maybe that was the problem. Maybe they needed to market in DC. Also, I think they could have, some of the donors could have been brought up there, or I don't know.
Sure.
There could have been things
Yeah, there
that they
could have been
could
things.
done.
But the bottom line is they decided not to do anything about it. They
Right.
decided not to market. And
Yeah.
and so this is where the rant began because Tracy's got a thing, and you got to admit it. You got this thing about orchestras, right? You have this thing about the way orchestras are run, and so can you say something about that? And honestly, I don't think I know completely what your opinion is on orchestras and how they're run, but I know you have one. So can you say what that is?
Yeah, well,
And it's not just North Carolina Symphony; it's just orchestras, right?
it's not. It's just all orchestras. And they're not all run exactly the same, but they're all nonprofits and they all have a management and they all have a board
Mm-hmm.
and they all have like the CEO person who runs the whole thing and goes to the board and tells them how everything is going. And
What's really funny is you probably know more about orchestras than, I bet if I lined up 50 musicians, they wouldn't be able to tell me even half of what you just said.
right. Well, I didn't know this until I got to North Carolina.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I just didn't care or no. I don't know which one. Or maybe both.
Which is really funny because you were trying to get a job in a business you didn't even know.
Exactly. And so that's the point you made. And then I sort of put my tail between my legs like, yes, you're right.
Which you don't, and like I say, you don't have to put your tail between your legs because it's completely human for you not to know. But I just think it's interesting. If anything, whenever I bring stuff like that up, it's more, I think it's interesting that you don't know, or that anybody, decides to get a job in a business they don't know. I'm like, really? You don't know? That's
Because we don't think of it as a business, I don't think. Well, it's like I play an instrument. I'm really
Right.
good at it. And I know that I can get a job, and the only place I can get a job is within this thing called an orchestra, and that exists out there. There's several of them out in the world, and who cares how they run themselves? They
Yeah.
have a thing that I want, and they'll pay me for it. So that's all I need to know, kind of thing. And that's kind of
Yeah.
where the knowledge stops.
Yeah.
And then as I lived here, and it's just I've been here. I've played regularly with the symphony for 10 seasons, and when you go on the road to drive to an hour each week, at least one or two of the concerts, you'd sit in the car for an hour or two,
Sure.
depending on the and lots of conversations would happen, and some friends that we carpooled with a lot, sometimes sometimes one or both of them would have been on the committee for negotiating or whatever. And so I started to learn about what happens, just hanging out with people who were on committees and what that looked like for every time that the contract was expiring and it was time to negotiate a new contract. I didn't even know that. I didn't even know that that's how it worked. So the orchestra picks a committee, and the committee goes into the management, and the management says, here's what we can offer you. And then the orchestra committee says, well, these are our priorities. This is what we want, and they work it out. They have to work out a deal, and orchestra musicians always want more money and more time off. And the orchestra always wants more work out of them for whatever they can get.
Right. Yep.
Because
Typical employer-employee relationship right there.
Yeah. So over the years, certain things have changed. It's just funny to see how things have changed in order for people to get what they want. You can see it over the years, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Totally.
And um and the musicians who negotiate are negotiating for, mostly their own best interests. Like they try to represent the orchestra, but if it's a negotiating year, certain musicians might volunteer based on the fact that they want to ensure that certain things don't get taken out of the contract that they find very important.
Sure. That
So
makes
there's
sense.
always politics, and so there's politics within this, and then just before we started recording, you brought up taking responsibility for,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that this is how things happen. So like you
Yep.
can you can watch how the orchestra makes moves and makes decisions and like maybe didn't raise enough money or they're on a deadline to raise, the matching
Well,
grant.
yeah, and I mean, and that's where the rant began was, you said that your husband said something about, I found out that they didn't market this, this tour. And there seemed to be like a concern or like
The concern
he
was
didn't
that
like.
the concern was that one of the concerts was only 50% full. And then the
Okay.
and then the person who was reviewing the concert was like, "Well, no one showed up to the North Carolina Symphony concert." It was like mentioned in the review. And I think
Oh, I'll bet that burned his ass right there.
yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't be laughing, but it's funny, and I'll tell you why it's funny. Because the musicians don't care until a review comes out and says, "Boy, this is really weird." There's that North Carolina Symphony. The only mention of North Carolina Symphony was that the thing was 50% full, and all of a sudden the musicians care, and that's where I say, "I'm sorry, where were you before the tour? Now suddenly after the tour, you have an opinion because you got written about. Now it's been exposed that there were 50% of the hall was filled when you were playing in it." And now all of a sudden you care. Really, where does your responsibility begin? That's the question. That's where the rant started.
Right. And so it's a valid argument, and also there's question marks because like what is a symphony member supposed to do about that? That's why it feels like
Right.
politics, because you're like, you know you can't suddenly decide that you're going to take over the marketing for a
Right.
specific thing like before it
one Hundred
happens. And
percent. Well, 100%. And here's where responsibility begins. And I'll tell you where it begins is if you choose to take a job with an orchestra and you're getting paid to be in said orchestra and they don't make the moves you want them to make, and you decided to take a paycheck with them and didn't decide to get involved in the governance or anything about that orchestra, I hate to say it, but you basically give up the right to bitch. You really do. You've chosen a junior position. That's what you've chosen. When you decide to take a paycheck from somebody, that's what you've chosen. You've chosen that you're not going to be responsible, that you're literally just going to show up and do your job and leave. That's what a paycheck is.
yes.
And so you then give up your right to bitch about it, is my opinion. You give up your right. This is why I'm self-employed. Why do you think I'm self-employed? Because I don't like the hierarchy of working for somebody and getting a paycheck from them, not liking the way they run it, and I reserve the right to bitch about it. Why? Because I'm not employed by them. If I'm a contractor, I can go in there and say things. I can quit. I can say what I want to say. I can leave. Whatever. If I'm not an employee, I can say whatever the hell I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
I really can. And so that's part of the reason why I choose to be self-employed, because I want a say in my life. I want to be responsible for my life. I want to have a say in my career. If I don't like something, I want to be able to walk.
This is like the founding principle of crushing classical when you're the way that you're talking about it right now, actually,
Mm-hmm.
because this is this is like this is the I don't know, like this is the root of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's why you would choose not to work for somebody else. Like
Yep.
if you want to
And
boil it
listen, you can, but you also give up your right to bitch, because orchestras do have management, they do have governance, there is a way that they operate. And look, if you haven't read the annual report of the orchestra you work for, you should probably shut your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
I'm serious. Like, not, and I don't mean you, obviously. I just mean anyone. Anyone who's in an orchestra right now and has complaints about how it's run. I'm sorry, but you took a job there. You elected to work there, play there, whatever. But it's still work. If you want to change orchestras, then get involved in music business and get involved in changing orchestras, whether it's as an executive director or president, I think is what they really call it, president and CEO.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's in fundraising, whether it's in, however that orchestras are governed, or even becoming a leader. Like you decided to call yourself sort of the leader of the, unique career, classical movement, if you will. That's really what you called yourself. You sort of called yourself responsible for it. Anyone could call themselves responsible for changing the face of how orchestras operate and are run in this world, but nobody's stepped up to do that,
Right.
Well,
Well, you know what?
like that's what responsibility is, though, is you call yourself responsible for it. That's what it is. And calling yourself
Right.
responsible does not include coming back from a tour and bitching about the fact that half the hall was empty and there was no marketing, and you showed up to play and there was nobody there to play. That responsibility doesn't lie in that realm. Sorry, doesn't.
Yeah. No, of course. It's just sort of like this. Go do the job, and that's
Yep.
what it is. You just have to suck it up and say, this is the job that I get paid to do.
Well, and that's the whole thing is, do you have to suck it up? I mean, could you, could you take that job for, say, a paycheck and then impact classical music in some other way, like on a side hustle, or create income another way? I'm not, look, this is just like government. This is the same as government. Okay, so, I don't get involved in politics. Why? I don't know. But I do get involved in politics in that I vote. But that's the only part of politics. I have not decided to become a senator. I have not decided to go into Congress. I have not decided to become any kind of political figure. But but let me tell you something. If I don't vote and then I bitch about how it turns out, then I really that's stupid, because there was a role that I was given and was allowed to play, and I didn't play that role, and then I bitched about it. That's stupid.
Yes. Okay, so you voted, and that's something, I guess. But maybe
Well, I mean, in our political system, that's what participation looks like if you're not going to be in politics.
right. And you can also write letters to your governors and senators and all that. You can
Absolutely.
take more, but
Absolutely.
in a way that, yeah, and you never know if it's going to help. I suppose if everyone in the orchestra, not necessarily this one, but everyone in an orchestra saw what was happening in a situation, and they banded together and said, "Look, this isn't working. This,
They've
these
already done that. It's called the union.
Oh yeah, you're right.
I mean, I'm not trying to be an asshole, but that's what they've already done that. But the union is really about protecting their time off and time worked and pay, and that's really what the union's
That's
for.
like at the fundamental level, like that. It's almost not even a problem anymore. And if it's really not, like, orchestras aren't trying to make you work like 4-hour rehearsals when the union
No.
says you're only supposed to. That's why the orchestras created their own kind of union type of organization called ICSOM, which I think I was telling you about. There's two different kinds of orchestras. There's the ICSOM orchestras, which stands for I forget what it stands for, but it's for orchestra and opera musicians.
Okay.
And then the second one is called the ROPA, which is the regional orchestra musician thing. So that's like for the really small orchestras, like the per service orchestras. And then the ICSOM is like everyone who makes, 30,000 and up, like salary position kind of thing. And so that's sort of like their orchestra's own union, because the American Federation of Musicians covers everybody, like rock musicians, jazz, recording artists, like probably it's pretty likely that everybody, in LA who's a rock musician, who knows if all of them are, but they might be members of the union, of that union,
Yeah, that makes sense.
So then the orchestra has their own because the rehearsals and everything is so specific and different from other musicians where they do whatever they want,
Yeah.
like a rock musician might say, we're going to rehearse for 8 hours until we get this right.
Well, and I think what's important here though is that, look, as a class, here's what I'm saying. This is my argument about classical music is what I know is that musicians are, and of course there's exceptions, right? Black violin, a lot of the people that you interview on your podcast, there are exceptions. Of course, there's exceptions to every rule, okay? But in general, let's just say in general, my problem with classical musicians is, and by the way, don't forget, I was one, and I behaved exactly the same way that you guys do. My problem is that classical musicians are waiting for somebody to change classical music, and they think it starts with the orchestras. They think it starts, well, the orchestras need to change it. They need to get more people into the audience. They need to get people interested in classical music. They. Where are you responsible? At what point do you call yourself responsible? Everybody's, there's so many articles that have been published about classical music is dying. I don't know necessarily that classical music is dying. What I know is that classical musicians are not calling themselves responsible for that it's dying. That's what I know.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. When I try to think of the arguments that I see to that statement that classical music is dying, people usually are just like, no, it's not, because, here's all these examples why it's not dying. Well, you can read the comments under those.
Yeah, and it's funny. I think classical music to stay relevant has to change. It has to evolve. And what I'm saying is classical musicians as a group, performers as a group, educators as a group are essentially, and again, like I said, there's outliers, there are exceptions to this rule, but mostly, generally, they're following the education they were given and going and perpetuating the same conversation, the same structure, the same framework, the same everything, and thinking that somehow classical music is going to have some kind of renaissance or all of a sudden come back again, or people are going to love it again. And that's just not going to happen. And we're living like it is, and that's not going to happen.
Yep.
That's what I'm saying. And so to call yourself responsible is to say, as a musician, I'm going to do something about this. And that does not mean joining an orchestra. That does not mean like becoming a player in an orchestra. Like all of a sudden you have a job, so your life is handled. That's not what I'm talking about. You getting a job does not impact classical music. I'm sorry, it doesn't. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying is you have to think beyond, if you're actually going to call yourself responsible for it, you have to think beyond your own career. You have to think, yes, your career is important, but your career is in the context. There's a larger context called classical music. And the only thing that's going to keep it relevant and keep it around is you. And you should not rely on an orchestra to do that for you. Mm-hmm. They don't know how.
They don't know how because they don't have any stake in it. There's nothing at stake for them. The people who are running it aren't the musicians. The musicians don't.
I mean, they don't. It's not even that. It's not even that. It's because they're not musicians. It's because they don't know how. That's
true.
Seriously, it has nothing to do with the fact that they're not musicians. I mean, do they have no stake in it? Yeah, I would say so. I mean, a board is a group of volunteers. That's what a board is. Any board of any nonprofit is a group of volunteers. They're getting paid to do other things in their lives. They're coming and volunteering to be on the board. Mm-hmm. So do I think they have a stake in it? No, I don't. And I don't think anyone has a mission so strong that, they decide to, become a volunteer, on a board and, they're going to try and change the world. Yeah, there's a few people, like I said, there's always outliers. There's always exceptions to the rule, but basically people join a board. Yeah, I mean, are they passionate about the mission? Are they passionate? Yeah, sure, of course they are. But at the end of the day, when the bell rings and the meeting's over, they're going home and they're going to be fine. It doesn't matter if the orchestra lives on or not. They're as long as, husband, wife, daughter, son, everybody's fed at home. All is well for them.
Yeah.
They don't have anything near at stake that you have at stake. Like if you actually want classical music to stay relevant or evolve, you have it, what's at stake is for you. It's not for any board on any orchestra. It's not.
Yeah.
You
And
know?
I think this actually really starts with understanding that this kind of tough love fact, actually, you
Yeah,
know,
it is.
that orchestras an orchestra surviving is just that, is just an orchestra trying to survive, but it's not trying to really, make an impact.
Yeah,
It's up to the
it was interesting too. You mentioned on text that one of the staff members had left the symphony.
Yes.
And she had this. She was very innovative. I guess she sounds like she was pretty innovative. Yeah.
I don't know all that went on, within the office when she worked there, whether or not she was trying to be innovative. I don't know the whole story. All I know is that she went and got another job, and now she works for um essentially another auditorium that's in Chapel Hill as opposed to Raleigh. And there's no, North Carolina Symphony plays there, but it's not part of their series, their music series. They have guests, and the whole thing is guests. Like they're just coming through. And the people that they get in there are incredible. Like who they're getting. And I don't know a whole lot about the organization actually, but
Yeah, but tell me what you told me on text.
what I told you was that my husband was looking, I don't know if he saw it on Facebook or something. He was scrolling on his phone and he was like, "Oh, this is interesting. They're having a concert that's really geared towards the Indian audience." There's a huge, because of Research Triangle Park, there's a huge population of Indians. And I think they're having some kind of concert. I should just look it up because I don't know. Carolina Performing Arts Center. They must have a coming up concert. And
so they're having a concert for that.
There's a concert with a person named Sanam Marvi.
Okay.
And apparently he seemed to think that it was already sold out. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Or not. But
the whole point is that they're appealing to an audience.
They're appealing to an audience that they know is hungry and is here.
Yeah. And again, this is what I mean by orchestras don't know how. They don't know the fundamentals, some of the things that you and I have talked about in these conversations, money, love, career, health, and time, the big five. They don't know about that.
Yeah.
Right. They don't know about hungry audiences. They don't pay attention to that. Like a lot of these people have never actually learned basic marketing and sales. And everything I've talked about at all, ever since, joining with you is basic marketing and sales. It's very basic.
It is. And I'm looking at their website right now, and it's phenomenal. The way they have it set up, you can get all the information you need, like right as soon as you get on their page. It's just right there. And then they have videos and interviews with the people who are coming, so you can get even hungrier about what you're about to see, which I think is so cool. Like that's exactly what happened to me the last time that I bought tickets to go there. That was when I went to the VJ Iyer concert. I watched like 3 miniature documentaries that were on their website, and I learned so much about him that I was like, this guy is cool. He's like a genius in jazz and he's amazing. And I wanted to go even more. I didn't really know that much about him, Yeah,
totally. So yeah, I mean, I just, there's a lot of unknowns, but I also think that, I understand the orchestras don't know, how to make classical music relevant, but, and that's why I wouldn't leave it up to the orchestras. And that's why I think it's funny that classical musicians as a group are they're sort of leaving, everybody's sort of waiting for somebody to come and save it, or somebody to come and change it, or somebody to come and make it relevant, or whatever. They're sort of waiting. Everybody's sitting and waiting. That's my point.
Yes.
Everybody's sitting and waiting. And also, at the same time, they're pursuing degrees, multiple degrees in most cases, and making, creating reasons for why they're doing that. I swear every single, classical musician that we talk to, they've got some reason why they're pursuing a degree, and they think it's such a good reason. They think it's such, like, why am I pursuing an advanced degree that's super expensive? Well, because everybody's got reasons,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really funny because that degree is not going to fix your career problem. It is not going to solve your career problem. Now, I do realize that some people are pursuing advanced degrees because they're going to be university professors, and I understand that advanced degrees are required for that, but that is not the majority.
Mm-hmm.
The majority is not pursuing being a professor.
And it also doesn't necessarily solve your career problem, even if you are, because it's a really, really tough competitive market to get one of those jobs. And, if you have a different set of skills outside of your playing, I talked to somebody recently who was I think it was something that he was really good at teaching marching band or something like that, and it helped him get a job. Like he had this other extra thing that maybe the other people applying for the job didn't have. Like, so just getting the degree and thinking that that's the answer to your problems isn't enough either anymore. No, it's not. And I think that's really the message that we're trying to send out more than anything is that the idea that, at some point you have to decide what you're responsible for. What are you going to call yourself responsible for? What are you going to own about this? When are you going to own it? Because sitting and waiting in a practice room, I say sitting and waiting, I know you're practicing, but that's not enough. Yeah.
But that's what you're doing. I mean, you're hiding in a practice room, basically.
Yeah, I mean,
you're hiding out until somebody goes, all clear, and then come out. I mean, that's really what you're doing.
I'll tell you what, when I decided to go get a master's, it was because I thought, I want to have a loan so that I can go move to the city and take more lessons and practice, have more time to practice.
Yeah, I believe that. That's so completely honest. I mean, because I don't know where you were, because you were going to IU, right, before you went to master's degree?
Yes, and I took a year off after that because I saw a lot of people just blindly continuing their studies at Indiana without stopping, like going straight from undergrad to grad to doctoral without stopping.
Sure, yeah.
And I was
but
like,
that happens a lot.
Yeah. And I was like, that's not going to be me. I'm not doing that. There's no way in hell. And then, so I took a year off, and I'm not sure. The thing that sucks about that is that there was nothing strategic about it except for that I was like, I know what I don't want, which is I don't want to go without knowing why I'm doing it, just to do it. And then I went home and I worked and realized, I felt separate from like the community that I needed to be around, in my opinion. And plus I wanted to take more lessons, and taking lessons is expensive. So, it
is,
Yeah,
totally. It's expensive. You're right. It's totally expensive. So yeah, no, I mean, but it's really honest of you to say, well, I wanted another loan so I could afford to move to the city and take lessons. I mean, that's honest.
And that's exactly how that's really how I was about it. I wasn't like, oh, I need this degree. I knew that was BS.
I'm sure a lot of people would, I mean, like if they were being honest, they would all say that, so many people go into advanced degrees. I mean, obviously not again, I'm always speaking generally. I'm not saying everybody.
Right.
I don't want anyone to misinterpret what I say. Like I say, there's always outliers. I'm always going to say that. There's always exceptions to this rule. But the majority of people, I bet they're taking master's degrees, doctoral degrees because, they're getting the loan, they're getting insurance, health insurance, which is extremely expensive now if you're not, to be covered by any sort of health insurance. I mean, this is such a different world that we live in now. It is so expensive to be covered.
Yeah.
By health insurance. It's so expensive. Unbelievable.
Totally.
No,
I remember I was covered under the insurance that my mom had through her work until I was 22 or something. I was lucky. But still.
Yeah, nowadays you can be covered until you're, I think, 26.
Oh, by your parents?
By your parents. I only know that because a few people I know who are like, I know a girl who's 23. She's still on her parents' insurance, and I think she has it till she's 26.
She should save $100 a month now
Yeah, because it's
for
going to
when
be
it's
real.
time.
Exactly, exactly. So, and I know, like, I get all the concerns about health insurance. I mean, I get that whole thing. I don't deny the value of that, but again, that's biding your time. That is not creating a career. And what's really interesting about all this is not just true of musicians. I mean, I know we're talking about musicians here, but I think everybody is on some level waking up and realizing that if they don't get out and create something for themselves, they're going to end up with a life they don't want.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are. Like, I don't care if you're in school right now for communications or English or you know psychology, whatever. I mean, if you don't begin, you've got to create your career no matter what. But we're obviously focusing on musicians because there's a musician is a special kind of person. Like, they truly are. Um, while they're entrepreneurial in that they've got drive and discipline and all of that, there's another side to them that's totally complacent.
Yes, 100% agree. And I want people to understand, coming from where I'm coming from, to tell you that getting a job in an orchestra is not the answer to your prayers, okay? It might provide you with a steady income, but I just have to say that it's almost impossible for you to get complete 100%, career satisfaction from one place. I really don't
Hmm.
think there's anyone in any orchestra. I don't care if it's the best orchestra, the
Hmm.
highest paid orchestra in the country, that you
I
can.
mean, listen, you have data to back that up. How many conversations have you had with full-time orchestral musicians who are like, "Yeah, this is not all it's cracked up to be."
Oh, so many. So
Hmm.
many.
Like, nobody talks about that, by the way. The whole polite thing. That's why musicians are so polite. They're not going to tell you, like, they should brag about their, principal or co-principal or even hell section spot in, the Philadelphia Orchestra or the Cleveland Orchestra or whatever. Like, they should be thrilled about that, right? The Metropolitan Opera. They should be thrilled about that. But if you get them privately and you put a glass of brandy in their hands and they have 4 or 5 sips, they're going to say something totally different. I promise you, they will.
Yeah.
That's what
Yep.
happens. It's musicians are super polite, but behind closed doors, they're breathing words of fire, as you would say.
Yeah, it's just the truth of the matter. I mean, you can't in a group of 160 to 100 people on the stage, you can't feel totally fulfilled, appreciated, respected all the
Yep.
time. It's
Yep.
not going to happen. So you're going into this situation, having won a job thinking that you just won like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Hmm.
And then you discover that your job is to go in and play your part. And if you can keep it real and say, this is what I'm doing and this is it. This is what I'm doing. Don't expect it to be like this thing where you're getting all these accolades like you did when you were in youth orchestra or whatever all the time. Like, oh my God,
Right.
you're amazing. You just killed that, fourth horn part on this part that, I mean,
Right.
I'm talking about fourth horn because it's me, like I've played
Right.
fourth horn, man, I killed those low notes. Like, I'm sorry, but they were better than I've ever heard anyone play those notes. And like, no one even heard it.
Right.
If you didn't get, if people didn't say anything, it means that you probably nailed it. Good job. No one noticed you. That's what you want.
Yeah. Totally. And of course that was your husband's complaint about the review. Like, nobody mentioned anything about the orchestra. The review for over the tour. He's
Right.
like, nobody. We played really well, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, you played really well, but you know,
They're
it,
only going to mention you if you sucked. Because
yeah,
it's not, honestly, let's be clear. Like, so the little piddly newspapers in North Carolina, the reviewer will be polite and say like, "Oh, they sounded so great, and this person played a beautiful phrase, and yada yada yada." But I think these were bigger newspapers. Like, I think it might have
okay,
been Times or one of the DC ones. So they're
hmm,
not gonna. they're gonna point out what sucked and
Right.
wrap up the article because people don't. I mean, what's more interesting to read, good news or bad news?
Right. Totally. Everybody's more interested in the bad news.
Right.
It would have been more interesting if somebody, basically, you know, if somebody really screwed up, it would have been way more interesting news to report.
Oh, it's always so much more drama when, and they're always picking on horns no matter what.
Oh,
I know my
totally.
teacher wouldn't, like, he was like arch enemies with John von Rhine, Chicago Symphony or Chicago Tribune writer.
Oh, really?
I think when he retired, they like made amends. Like, hey, dude, I really don't hate you. I was doing my job. But he had to write, like,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
Clevenger botched this or whatever. Like, he would he would be sitting in the audience waiting for something bad to happen, basically.
Oh my God, that's awful. That's
Yeah.
awful.
And I think they, you know, I know that those guys don't read their reviews.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
I wouldn't want to either.
No, I mean, I get that. I totally get that. But yeah, so I mean, this is, again, you get to decide what you call yourself responsible. You decide, or not. And then, you give up the right to bitch about it. That's it. If you're not going to be responsible for your career or whatever you decide to be a part of, if you're not going to create change in it, then you probably can't bitch about it. And by the way, that's why I don't bitch about politics. Like, I don't get involved in those discussions because honestly, and this is really what I think. My job is to vote, so I do that job. But after the voting is over, it's done, and there's nothing else to talk about, whether my side, quote unquote, won or not. The only right that I have to bitch is when I decide to get involved.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And that's my point of view, obviously, but that's really what I think is, I don't get to bitch about politics if I'm not going to get involved and change politics.
Right. Right.
So I vote and then I shut up. That's it. And that's the role I choose to play. And by the way, you don't have to get involved in everything. I don't have to get involved in politics. I don't. You're a parent. You don't have to get involved in parent-teacher organizations if you don't want to.
Right.
You decide what you get involved in. You decide what you call yourself responsible for. My point is, if you want classical music to change, or if you want to see change in it, then get responsible for it and be a part of it. Quit waiting for someone else to do it and then bitch about the fact that it isn't done the way you want it done. That doesn't work.
Right.
That's my point. And you can, again, by the way, you may have the same opinion or not. This is our first time talking about this.
Well, I'll tell you what, for me, it's hard to translate it into, wow, how could I really make a difference? Like, say I had a job and I really wanted to see things get better in my own orchestra in certain aspects. It would be really hard to figure out how to really, it would be like a fight, actually. Would be,
Would
it would,
it?
I don't know, maybe it wouldn't be, but
It's interesting that you think it would be a fight right off.
well, just because it's not traditional that musicians would step in and say something about certain things. No one says anything. No one would say, "Hey, look, I don't think this is marketed enough. I'd really like to see it marketed if we're going to go up and do this thing." I think they would just
Or you could get a job in the quote unquote marketing department of your orchestra and impact it that way.
yeah, I guess you could.
Or you play in an orchestra and you impact it some other way. It doesn't necessarily have to be in your orchestra. Maybe you take it a level higher and you go, okay, I'm going to create, I don't know, an event for, I'm making this up, presidents and CEOs of orchestras. And I'm going to invite them all, and I'm going to I'm going to do a town hall discussion with orchestra, and I'm going to invite all the regional, like all the orchestras in my region, to everybody come together and talk about how we can make classical music relevant. I'm absolutely making this up right now, but what's so interesting to me is that your initial thing is, I don't know how I can get involved without it being a fight.
Yeah, you're right. And as soon as you started to say this stuff, I was like, wow, I never even thought of those things. That's a good idea.
I'm
That's a
making it
really
all
good.
up, right? I don't know,
I
right?
know, but it is a good idea. Who's stopping anybody from creating an event or creating a town hall or,
Hmm.
having a discussion or,
Hmm.
how can we help or creating a new musician committee geared towards
Yep.
social media content or something
I mean,
or
yeah.
even
Well,
just changing the policies about social media,
well, yeah, and here's what's interesting too. Like, I don't think anyone really gets this, but let's just talk about for a second the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Do you know anything about? By the way, there was a really great, in my tradition of watching, CBS Sunday Morning, there was a really great um, segment on CBS Sunday Morning about the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they are doing so much to impact education in this country
Oh,
and
no.
elsewhere, by the way, and elsewhere. But I mean, education, like as kids are coming up, from really super young and coming up through school, they are actually actively working on changing education in this country. They are actively working on it. They have other initiatives too, and they have a lot of money. Let's be honest. Bill and Linda Gates, we all know who they are. Microsoft.
Yeah.
So that has a lot to do with it. But they have a lot, and they fund a lot of causes. Like so much of their money has gone to, they're constantly donating to, because they're a foundation. They're constantly donating to causes that they're willing to get behind. But nobody told them to go. Look, they made a bunch of money. Nobody told them to go and put a foundation together. They decided to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know. Um, but that's my point. When if you're going to change something, are you going to change it, or are you just going to sit there and bitch about it? And I just think it's interesting that your immediate point of view is that when there's change that needs to happen, there's got to be a fight. That's so interesting that that's the first place you go. Like immediately you think there's a conflict.
Well, I think it's just because I wasn't thinking bigger. Like you're putting out something that's bigger. I was thinking, oh, we have to go within the existing organization and work within it to try to convince people that they're doing it wrong and they need to change it. But
Hmm.
you immediately went to a bigger place, like
Yeah, because
outside of
I
the
don't think,
organization.
yes, because I don't think change always happens inside. I think change sometimes has to happen at a contextual level. In
Well,
fact, the best change happens at a contextual level.
it's so interesting how yeah, I didn't even see that until you started talking about the different choices that there could be. I mean,
Hmm. Yep.
and I think probably most musicians would go where I went. They would go, well, we can't change this because, the marketing department, they are employed and that they're doing their job and that's what they're supposed to be doing and it's not our business or whatever. Like I swear to God, no musician in my general vicinity would have said any of the things that you just said at all.
Hmm. Yep. I
So
get
that's
that.
fascinating to me, just
Yeah.
fascinating.
I get that. And what's interesting is, you look at Bill and Melinda Gates, let's just use them as an example again. They didn't go into schools and try and tell the schools they were doing it wrong. No, they established a foundation and said, we have a whole big pile of money here, and we're going to get behind certain initiatives and drive certain initiatives so that we can change education in this country.
Amazing. And like, what if someone did the same thing for orchestra? Because,
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yes.
certainly there's a musician who's good at enrollment somewhere who could start approaching, because that's the other thing that the people bitch about here. They go, oh, why isn't the symphony approaching? I mean, we live in a very, well, well off community, to be honest. Like as far as the amount of
Hmm.
different companies that are here, we have Cisco, we have, what are some of the other ones?
Yeah,
What's
you've got
that
them.
one?
Actually, a lot of them are on the North Carolina Symphony website. They're donors.
Oh, are they? Okay.
They're
Some of
corporate, yeah, they're corporate sponsors. If you scroll down on the whole, I was looking at it earlier because I was looking at the annual report when you and I were ranting earlier. If you scroll all the way down to on the bottom of the website, their corporate sponsors are listed there.
Okay. But there's
There's
a
a
lot
lot of
that
good companies there. Yep.
Right. That's
Hmm.
great. That's awesome. And then there's a lot that people have heard, oh, they've never approached this company or that company. But like you said, well, what if someone took it national and created some kind of a foundation just like that and approached people and really enrolled them in saying, I want to change classical music and I want to save up money and I don't want to, like you said, not just start handing it out to everybody, but hand it out to the people who want to impact change and do something different.
Yeah, totally. And listen, everybody wants money from Bill and Melinda Gates. Believe me, that's all they talk about. Everybody's constantly writing grants to get money from Bill and Melinda Gates because they have all the money, quote unquote. And for them, it's not about money. I mean, it is and it isn't. They're of course they have a lot of money to work with. They and that's why everybody's asking for money from them. But they have stringent requirements, and they're very clear about what they're going to support. They're very clear about what they're going to get behind. And by the way, I don't care if somebody does this for classical music in a nonprofit or a for-profit. I don't care if it's nonprofit or for. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care whether it's what the business entity is that's getting it done. I don't care if it's an individual that's getting it done. I think everybody thinks that that's what it needs to be. And that is the problem. There's this point of view that exists that, there's a certain way that this is going to happen and it's not on me and I can't do this because I'm not big enough or whatever. And if not you, then who?
I know.
That's the point.
Yeah.
That's the point. If not you, then who? Whose job is it if it's not yours? That's what responsibility is. It's calling yourself forth and saying, I am responsible. That's all it is.
If not who, then if
If not
you,
you, then who? If not you, then who? It is. If not, now, then when? I don't know. And these are questions everybody gets to ask. And by the way, I'm not saying that you have to do a damn thing about it. Like you can literally shut off this fireside chat and go, she's crazy. She crazy. I'm not going to do that. Okay, fine. I'm not going to, whatever. But then you also give up your right to bitch.
Exactly.
That's what I'm saying. You also give up your right to bitch.
Exactly.
Because saying that you're not going to be responsible for it and saying you're crazy, I'm not going to do anything about it, and then bitching about it just has it doesn't work.
Right.
It doesn't work. That's just like bitching about, who got elected locally and then saying you didn't vote. Oh, I see. Okay. Mm-hmm. So it's everybody else's job to elect people, but when it doesn't turn out your way, now you have a problem. I see. That's the whole thing. This is where you have to call into question where responsibility starts and ends. Where does it begin? Where does it end?
Totally.
So obviously some really big ideas we discussed today. I'm clear about that. And I'm sure this is a discussion that's not over yet. And I'm completely open to other points of view on it, what other people see about it. We're getting together and chatting about rants that we're having, conversations that we're having over here about and a conversation that isn't happening right now. And this is really the only place it's happening.
It is. So I'm really glad we talked about that today because, it's kind of the big elephant in the room, to be honest. So yeah, this was great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Eileen, this was awesome. If you're enjoying these talks, you know what? I want to hear from you. I really would love to hear from you anywhere, just anywhere. Facebook, Instagram, you can direct message me. You can write comments under posts. I want to hear from you. I want to hear what you think, especially about this conversation. I'm going to post some posts about this. So, it might, inspire someone to come and listen to this. And if they haven't heard the whole conversation. And I want to start a conversation about this because I can tell you what people bitch about it. So I want to know, I want to know what people think about it. So that's really what I want.
It's human to bitch. But it's better to be responsible, like get involved.
I agree.
So
awesome. Okay. Thank you, Eileen. And if you're enjoying Crushing Classical, please write a review on iTunes and join us in the conversation on Facebook. at facebook.com/crushingclassical and on Instagram at crushingclassical and on Twitter at crushclassical. All right. Talk to you soon. Thanks a lot, Eileen.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.